Hi guys, welcome back to Soge King Recaps. Today I will bring the first season of the anime titled Steins Gate. Mankind's greatest gift is its insatiable curiosity, and that also becomes the reason for its demise more often than not. Man has always been curious about the stars, about space, and even more so about time. What if I could go back and save someone? What if I had the power to control the events of a certain time? What if I could go back and fix things? These are all things that every human being has thought about, and few of them have even tried to accomplish this feat. Today, we're going to be focusing on an anime where such humans with their insatiable curiosity actually succeed in going back to the past, leading to an unpredictable future. So let's get into it. Okay, Rintaro is a delusional man. He talks to himself, he thinks up conspiracy theories, and claims that he's a mad scientist on the radar of a hypothetical evil organization. He has a childhood friend named Shina Mayuri and a computer scientist best friend Hashida Ikaru, mostly known as Daru. Oke lives in the city of Akihabara, and in the summer of 2010, he and Mayuri decide to go to the Akihabara radio building where a famous scientist, Dr. Nakabachi, is holding a seminar on the topic of time travel. As Oke is snooping around the building, he comes across a beautiful redhead girl named Mikisa Kurizu. She says that she met him just a little while ago, but Oke denies having ever met her at all. After this weird interaction, Oke receives a video message on his phone. He's unable to play it, and just as he's wondering what all of this means, he hears the scream of a woman. Upon investigating the source, Oke finds Kurisu's dead body lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood. He concludes that she was stabbed and runs away from the scene. He then sends an email to Daru back at the lab, explaining the whole situation. But just as he presses the button to send it, he goes in a weird trance. He finds himself in the middle of a completely empty district and is completely confused about what is going on. When he comes to, he sees that a weird metallic object that is shaped like a satellite has crashed into the radio building. Later, when he gets back to his house, which he calls the Future Gadget Laboratory, he notices some weird inconsistencies. We find out that the lab's whole system is connected to his so-called phone microwave, and Oke finds out that the seminar he just went to seems to have been canceled because of the crashed satellite. It appears that the seminar never really happened at all. As he's dealing with the absurdity of all this, he and Daru go to a forum for some random delusional everyday stuff from Okabe. There he finds out that the email he sent about Mikisa Kurizu arrived 5 days earlier. And just as he's dealing with all of this, he sees Mikisa Kurizu in the flesh, as if the events at that radio building had never happened in the first place. Oke is bamboozled when he sees that Kurizu is still alive. He tries to approach her, but she brushes him off as a weirdo. Later, in her lecture on the possibilities of a time machine, he tries to interrupt her by citing some stuff without any proof and gets himself embarrassed by her in front of a crowd. Later, he goes to a temple for some supplies from his friend, Luca the Reshibara, who is a boy that looks a whole lot like a girl. He then comes back to the lab to find yet another new face around the lab. This new face is a girl named Suzuva Main, who works for Oke's landlord, Mr. Braun. Oke also happens to be an avid keyboard warrior, as he is debating about the possibilities of time travel with different people online all the time. He then sees that John Tudor, a man who claimed that he was from the future in the year 2000 and then vanished from the internet, has come to life once again, now in 2010. Oke thinks that this one is a phony trying to ride the coattails of that man from 2000 and dismisses him. But he then finds out that any evidence about John Tudor's existence prior to this has vanished from the internet. It simply does not exist now. The next day, another weird woman named Kiryu Moka meets Oke and asks him about some old PC model called the IBM 5100. Later in the lab, we see that Oke is once again up to no good as he starts his experiments with the bananas and his phone microwave again. The previous experiments resulted in the banana turning into a green gelatinous substance, but this time, the banana actually disappears from the microwave oven and gets reattached to its bunch. And what's even more shocking is that the reattached banana is in its green gelatinous form. And just as everyone is trying to figure out what's happened here, Kurisu arrives at the lab. As everyone is surprised to see Kurisu there, she tells them that she's only there out of curiosity. She sees the banana bunch and wants to examine the phone microwave. But Oke isn't going to let her do that until she properly becomes a lab member. After some fooling around here and there, and after Kurisu becomes lab member No. 004, Oke and the others perform another experiment with the phone microwave. But things take a turn for the worse when Mayuri opens the oven, leading to an electric surge. But despite this minor setback, they're able to successfully send an email to the past. And so Oke puts two and two together and comes to the conclusion that he has indeed made a time machine in the form of this phone microwave. It isn't possible to physically travel back in time just yet, but they can send messages to the past through it. But Kurisu doesn't believe it even after seeing it with her own eyes. She storms out of the lab with a look of denial, while Okabe tells Daru to hack into the database of SERN, a global scientific organization. He wants him to investigate the existence of micro-black holes and their relationship with a large hadron collider, as he heard about these terms on the internet. Later on, he hears about SERN being responsible for a dystopian future from John Titor, the man claiming to be a time traveler. In the meantime, Daru successfully accesses the SERN database, and the gang finally learns about the truth. They find out that the same experiments they have been carrying out on a banana, SERN has been carrying out on humans, and the results haven't been favorable for them, as the subjects have all died. Even though Daru has hacked the SERN database, he can't access some files that have been particularly encrypted to be decoded only by a certain device. Okabe shares some stuff with Tiger, and he tells him that the thing they need to decode those files is an IBM 5100, the same PC that Mocha was looking for. As Okabe tries to figure out how to get his hands on an IBM 5100, he goes out to do his laundry. When he's out there, he spots Kurisu. She is still not convinced of the fact that a real-time machine could actually exist, but when Okabe tells her about the IBM 5100, she starts wondering about the computer's capabilities. On Mayuri's end, she works in a maid cafe, one of the main attractions of Akihabara. The owner of that cafe, Ferris, is the daughter of a really powerful man in the corporate cycle. She tells Okabe that her family had an IBM 5100 that they gave to Luca's family shrine, and if they're lucky, then the shrine should still have it. Afterwards, Okabe and Kurisu go to the shrine and luckily find the IBM 5100 there. And since it's quite heavy, they carry it back to the lab together. As the two of them arrive at the lab of the retro PC, Suzuha sees them. She then gives a very strange reaction to seeing Kurisu. She tells Okabe that he should stay on his guard around Kurisu, while the other lab members gather the parts needed for Daru to connect the IBM 5100 to his computer and start his work. Now that they have the device to bypass the encryption, Daru, Okabe, and Kurisu find out some top-secret information. They find a bunch of information from different time periods in SERN's database. They see that those humans have become just like those bananas that got turned into jelly. Due to the experiments of SERN, people have been sent to different points in time, and they have all turned into a green gel-like state and died. Kurisu's theory is that this reaction has resulted from matter being squeezed at a subatomic level, which happens thanks to the gravity of the micro-black hole that SERN has been using as the test subjects pass through them. All the people that have been experimented on like this have died, and so every file has the tagline, "Human is dead, mismatch." But even after witnessing all these horrible results of SERN's experiments, Okabe is determined to perfect his time machine. Now that they are actively sending messages to the past thanks to all the information they know, they have coined a term for the messages. They are calling those messages D-mails. They send different messages to the past and figure out what they can and cannot do with D-mails. Apparently, there is a limit to the amount of characters they can use, as using too many characters will be too much information for the phone microwave to process. The next day, Mocha shows up at the lab and says that she needs to borrow the IBM 5100. She doesn't tell them her reasons, but since Okabe and the others are unable to hide what they are trying to do from her, they appoint her as the 5th lab member. Later, Daru boosts up the phone microwave's performance by updating its firmware. So Okabe decides that it's time they perform a serious experiment. He tries to alter the history itself by sending useful information to the past. So he sends the winning lottery numbers to Luca so that he buys the winning tickets this time instead of the losing ones. And just as he sends the D-mail, he experiences a weird sensation. It was exactly the sensation he had felt back when the weird incidents in the radio building happened. But after a while, when he finds out that Luca did not win the lottery and no one else was aware that they did the experiment, Okabe gets confused. But upon some investigation, he finds out that Luca actually did receive the mail and only lost because he mistook the number for another, making him a loser once again. After spending some time with Suzuha, Okabe realizes that he has been shifted to a different world line. In this world line, the experiment never took place in the first place, as Luca had already bought the ticket. All of this explains why everyone's memories are different from Okabe. But that still doesn't explain why Okabe alone remembers the events of the previous world line. So he turns to the one person who may actually have the answer, John Titor. He tells him about all of this, and Titor deduces that Okabe may be a really special person who is able to retain memories across world lines, making him the one person who can actually lead the world beyond the 1% divergence point, which might be enough to prevent the world from falling into dystopia. As Okabe finally figures out what has transpired here, he starts to make sense of everything. He then explains it to Daru and Kurisu, who seem to be in agreement with him. He refers his ability to have memories across world lines as reading Steiner, and urges everyone to continue the experiments so that they can get to the bottom of this. Now, as they are experimenting, Mocha comes with a request. She wants to send a D-mail to someone. Okabe lets her do that, and this shifts Okabe into another world line where he is the only one who remembers Mocha. No one else has any memory of a lab member No 005 or any weird she-girl named Kiryu Mocha, leading Okabe to wonder what kind of world line he has entered. But after that, Luca comes to the lab and says that he wants to send a D-mail to someone as well. He tells them that he has all the qualities of a girl, so he wants it to be so that he was actually born a girl. But when everybody asks how they can even make that possible, he tells them about a myth on how a mother eating leafy vegetables will affect the gender of the baby. Even though they're not really believing in what he's saying, the gang still says that it's worth giving a shot since they've got nothing to lose. But then another problem comes up. The period that Luca wants to send a D-mail to doesn't have mobiles or an email system, but the gang somehow finds a workaround by sending the message to his mother's pager. And so, Okabe once again travels to another world line as he feels the effects of reading Steiner, but even after looking everywhere, there are no obvious changes in the world line really, so he brushes it off for the moment. Later, Okabe and Daru are discussing the phone microwave and D-mails, and Ferris overhears them. Okabe then finds out that the IBN 5100 wasn't found in this timeline in the first place, so they don't have it in the lab. That must have been the change that happened because of the message that Mocha sent to the past. Kurisu then gives a theory on the butterfly effect of time travel. She tells everyone that they have been making little changes to the past, and those little changes have led to even more changes, causing a ripple effect that has spiraled out of their control. Okabe goes to Luca's shrine to investigate the whereabouts of the IBN 5100, but he's only able to find out that the shrine doesn't have it either, as it was taken from the shrine a while back. Okabe then runs into Mocha in the town and tries to ask her about the IBN 5100's whereabouts, but she refuses to cooperate as she claims that she herself doesn't know where it is. And now that all of this has spiraled out of control, Okabe finds out that everyone in this world line has met Mocha already, unlike the last one that resulted from Mocha's D-mail. This confirms Kurisu's butterfly effect theory, and the gang is stumped on what to do next. And just then, Ferris offers to help. She reveals herself to be Rumiho Akiha, the daughter of the man who virtually owns the entire city of Akihabara. Ferris offers them a trade. She'll give them the information they need on the IBN 5100 since it was her family who owned it in the original world line in the first place, and in return, they'll let her send a D-mail 10 years into the past. She won't tell what she wants to send either, but since Okabe has no choice, he agrees with the plan and grants her wish. He then experiences yet another instance of activation of the reading Steiner, confirming a world line shift, and hopes that they can now find the IBN 5100. But even this time, Farah's father claims that they don't have the PC any longer. But just as that truck had hit Okabe, there was another one coming his way. He looks around the town and finds out that the entire town has completely changed. It is no longer a central hub for anime and cosplayers, and it gives the vibes of a completely different city, making Okabe realize that he may have gotten himself involved in something far beyond the scope of his power and influence. Completely baffled by everything that has changed in Akihabara, Okabe realizes that it must have been because of the D-mail that Ferris sent that Akihabara has failed to become a Mo hub. As the girls are planning a girls-only vacation in the lab, Luca naturally joins in. As Okabe is completely taken aback by the absurdity of it all, he bullies Luca, thinking that he will admit that he isn't a girl. But after thorough examination of his body, Okabe realizes that Luca's gender did in fact get changed when they sent the D-mail. So now he's a female. And now that he can't go back to the lab for a while as everyone thinks that he is a douchebag for what he did to Luca, he goes and talks with Suzuha for a while. She reveals that she came to this town so that she could find her father, but since she hasn't had any success, she's gonna leave town the next day. Feeling bad for the girl, Okabe arranges a farewell party for her as he has now made her the latest lab member. Afterwards, as everyone is preparing for the party, Okabe receives an ominous message telling him that he is being watched. Later, as he's shopping with Mayuri, Okabe remembers that he vaguely remembers triggering reading Steiner when he was a child, and that he got sick back then around the time he experienced it. Later that night, Suzu sends Okabe a text, bidding him farewell and telling him that she won't be attending the party as she needs to go. Okabe doesn't like how this is turning out and sends a D-mail to his past self, instructing him to follow Suzuha and convince her to stay for the party. In the New World line, the gang discovers that the reason they can only send D-mails at certain times of the day is because the phone microwave needs a lifter to function properly. So to send a D-mail to the past, the CRT television in Mr. Braun's shop must be turned on. Without that, the D-mail won't go. Kurisu then comes up with a brilliant idea. She wants to compress the memories of a person and send them back to the past via the D-mail system. That way, the consciousness of that person will be transferred to the past, and that person will be able to time leap. And according to her, that's as close to physical time travel as they are gonna get with the technology on hand. She then asks Okabe to bring her the parts that she needs. So Okabe hits the market with Mayuri, explaining to her on the way that a time leap is a much safer option than sending D-mails to the past, as the person leaping in time will actually have control over their actions in the past. On the other hand, D-mails always seem to cause a ripple effect. Suzuha runs into them on the way since she stayed in town thanks to the effects of the D-mail, as she tells Okabe once again that Kurisu is dangerous and works for SERN. But Kurisu vehemently denies this, and to add more weight to her story, she tells Okabe about how her father was so jealous of her that he started causing problems simply because she excelled in the scientific field more than him. After a while, Okabe leaves the lab to go shopping. When he's out there, he receives a really ominous message yet again. This time, it is much more direct, as it's a picture of a doll with a severed head. Completely terrified for Mayuri's safety, Okabe runs back to the lab and confirms for himself that she's safe. For now. Daru then gives the group some really frightening news. He tells them that the lab has been connected to the SERN network for quite a while now and they haven't noticed. Coupled with the text he just received, Okabe is stumped on what he can do now. Since the lab is connected to the SERN network, they are able to use the LHC now. So the hindrance that was stopping the time leap machine from getting completed is gone now. And so Kurisu completes her time leap machine, as they're now able to compress memories and send them up to 2 days back. But Okabe is suffering from paranoia and anxiety, as he's scared that something bad might happen to them. So he convinces everyone not to use it. He then suggests that they make their findings public to avoid those threatening texts. But a completed time leap machine demands a party, but the merry atmosphere is ruined by Suzuha when she accuses Kurisu of being a CERN spy and claims that if she's not one yet, then she'll become one later. Kurisu opposes the notion, of course, but the atmosphere doesn't seem to settle down until Mayuri intervenes and calms them down. As the gang hears about a bomb threat meant for the railway station, Suzuha flees the lab since she has put 2 and 2 together and realizes that the threat may be from CERN. But just as everything seems to have calmed down, Mayuri says, "My watch has stopped," and just then, a bunch of armed men force themselves into the lab. Their leader is Mocha, and she claims that they are hounds hired by CERN. She orders the men to capture Kurisu, Okabe, and Daru, before she orders her men to exterminate Mayuri Shina, as she is not necessary for CERN's purposes. The hounds do exactly as told, and Mayuri dies by their hands. Before anybody has had any time to process what has just happened, Suzuha comes to save the day. She takes out a few hounds and engages the rest so that she can give Okabe and Kurisu a chance to use the time leap machine and go back in time to fix this mess. Kurisu turns on the machine and Okabe time leaps back to 5 p.m. of the same day. As everyone is preparing for the party in the lab at that time, he frantically tells everyone to get out of there as it's not safe. He then starts his search for Mayuri immediately, as she's the one who needs to be protected the most. Okabe gets a call from Kurisu, and judging from his tone and surety in certain actions, she concludes that he has leaped back in time. After a while, Okabe succeeds in finding Mayuri and decides to take her to the station so that he can take her somewhere far away. But as he gets to the station, he realizes that none of the trains are running because of the bomb threat. They attempt to get out of there, but rounders locate them and Mayuri is killed once again as she's run over by Mocha's car. Okabe still doesn't accept this chain of events and flees the scene. He goes back to the lab and time leaps again. This time, he locates Mayuri much sooner than last time and makes it to the subway in time for the trains to still be running. But from out of nowhere, Nay, Mr. Brown's daughter, arrives and accidentally pushes Mayuri in front of a moving train. Since this death was not related to the rounders at all, Okabe is completely stumped on what to do. But despite all these depressing odds, he vows to keep trying until he succeeds. Okabe tries again and again and again to save Mayuri, but fails every single time. In one of his confrontations with Mocha, he learns that CERN is targeting the lab because Okabe and the others have successfully created a time machine and even want to go public with it. So the fact that Mayuri is consistently dying over and over again is because of Okabe's own actions. This breaks him completely, as he knows that he can't succeed now. During his depressive episode, Kurisu comes to him and asks him to confide in her. When Okabe reveals everything to her, she tells him that he needs to do another time leap and even gives him information about herself to convince her past self to cooperate with him. So Okabe now leaps back 2 days and arrives before the time leap machine has been even completed. After convincing the new Kurisu to help him, the two of them start to devise a plan. But before they can do anything, Suzuha arrives and offers them information in her aid. She tells them that there are 2 main world lines, alpha and beta, and all of the other choices and world lines form a convergence spiral. Suzuha tells them that if they want to save Mayuri, then they must defy fate and go past the alpha world line attractor field and jump to the beta world line. The three of them then go to the crashed satellite in the radio building, which Suzuha reveals is a time machine. She also reveals that she's the John Titor that Okabe has been talking to and has come here in the year 2036. Suzuha tells the two of them the story of her world line. She came from an era where SERN has completely taken over the world by building a time machine. She stated further that her mission was to go to 1975 and grab an IBM 5100, but she got distracted midway and made a detour to 2010 because she wanted to look for her father. Now as she tries to start the time machine, she realizes that it's broken. Okabe then remembers that the time machine must have been broken the night he stopped her from going as there was a storm that night. Okabe leaps back 2 days again and gives everyone a mission. He gets Daru to fix the time machine while he tells everyone about the time machine situation. Mayuri then comes up with the idea that the lab members who aren't doing anything should look for her father as she doesn't want her to go without meeting him. They ask her if she has any clue, but all she gives them is a badge. Suzuha also gives Okabe a glowing device known as a divergence meter. It has a number written on it and it changes depending on what world line you're in. So for someone like Okabe who has the reading Steiner is the perfect device. She also tells her about his heroics in the future as she tells him that he's the leader of the resistance force against SERN. Okabe searches for her father in every corner of Akihabara, and even though Suzuha just appreciates the effort alone, he doesn't want to give up. In the end, he finally finds a lead regarding him from a badge maker as he tells them that he's the one who made such a badge for a client before. But time is running out for Okabe, and a small clue like this is not enough. So to find the client, Okabe decides to time leap and meet the client himself. But to his surprise, the client actually turns out to be Daru. He had the idea that if he got a fake badge for her, then it would make her happy. But the badge matters aside, Daru reveals a shocking fact about Suzuha's time machine. Turns out, it only goes back into the past and simply cannot travel forwards. This means that whatever they do, they won't be able to see Suzuha's face ever again once she goes back. But brushing the sad stuff aside, once Daru completes the repairs of the time machine, Mayuri reads the name on it. From that name, she deduces that Daru is indeed Suzuha's real father. The two of them share some wholesome moments with Daru's occasional perverted comments in between. But in the end, Suzuha goes back to 1975. But Okabe is not satisfied unlike the others as he notices that the divergence meter hasn't changed at all, and he hasn't experienced reading Steiner either. After waiting for a few hours, someone comes to the lab's door. Expecting it to be Suzuha, everyone rushes to the door, but it's Mr. Braun instead. He is here to deliver a letter from Suzuha. The letter dictates that the time machine's repairs were faulty, and when she arrived in 1975, she didn't even know who she was. So she couldn't procure the IBM 5100 and has lived her whole life without accomplishing a single thing. She stresses so much that she has failed in her mission that everyone is moved to tears. Upon asking, Mr. Braun tells them that she committed suicide 10 years ago and wanted him to deliver this letter to Okabe and the others. Okabe thinks that it's his fault since he stopped her from going back to 1975 on that stormy night, which damaged the time machine so much. So he sends a D-mail, knowing that everyone else will forget their time with Suzuha, and the world line changes to the previous one. As he meets with Mr. Braun once again, Okabe asks him about Suzuha, and he tells her that she died of an illness and lived a satisfying life this time. It also gives him a divergence meter that he received from Suzuha herself, and Okabe then notices that the reading on the meter has now finally changed, but it still hadn't gone beyond 1%. Now that the world line has changed, Okabe hopes that Mayuric's death has been avoided. He anxiously waits for the rounders or anything that will kill her on the day that it's supposed to happen, but the crisis is avoided as it doesn't. But right as the next day arrives, Mayuri dies once again. Okabe is now completely confused about what to do, so Kurisu tells him that she has a theory. If undoing one D-mail delayed her death a little, then maybe, if they keep undoing D-mails, they may arrive in a world line where they have the IBM 5100 again, which they can then use to hack into SERN and get them off their trail once and for all. Since they need to go by order, next up is Farah's turn. Okabe tries to ask her about the D-mail she sent, but she doesn't remember anything since she doesn't have reading Steiner. After some conflicts with Farah's rivals, Okabe fakes her back to her old cafe, a place full of memories for her. He tells her about all the more things that Akihabara used to have and tries to get her to remember. After a while, Farah vaguely starts remembering the previous world line and tells him that she actually sent a D-mail to her father, stopping him from walking into his death many years ago. She sent that email to save her father, and her father sold the IBN 5100 to pay as ransom for a fake kidnapping scenario that Ferris organized to stop him from boarding the plane. After contemplating for a while, Ferris finally accepts that she can't live with her father at the cost of others' lives, since her father wasn't supposed to be alive in the first place. After accepting this harsh reality, she sends a D-mail that negates her earlier one, and the world line shifts to the time when Akihabara was a mode district. But even now, Okabe doesn't have IBN 5100, and so Mayuri's death is still on the cards. Next up on the D-mail undoing chain is Luca. Okabe tries to tell her how she used to be a male in the other world lines, and he needs her to go back to being a male for Mayuri to live. She doesn't believe him at all at first, but after a while she says that she will do it if Okabe takes her out for a day. Even after being thoroughly advised by Kurisu and Daru, the date doesn't go as well as planned. And just like Farid, Luca starts remembering the earlier world line where she used to be a guy, the realization crushing her completely as she knows that if she's a guy, she won't be able to seriously pursue Okabe as a love interest. Okabe later realizes that he fumbled the date because he wasn't trying to be himself. He was simply pretending. So he goes to the shrine and uses the rest of the day as a training session with Luca, as that is the core of their relationship. Okabe then sends the D-mail and moves back to the world line created because of Mocha's D-mail. Okabe arrives at Mocha's apartment now, but he's completely taken by surprise when he finds out that Mocha has killed herself. So he time leaps his way back and finds her before she commits suicide. Upon seeing her, he realizes that she's at her wit's end because of a person named FB. She practically worships him, and he was the one who timed her to procure the IBN 5100. Even after stealing Mocha's phone, he realizes that everything she said about the D-mail was a complete lie. Telling Mocha that's all useless, and that she will commit suicide after FB ignores her, leads Okabe to find the text that she actually sent back. But even after another D-mail to nullify that message, the world line remains the same. This is due to the fact that Mocha will not believe anything unless it is sent from FB's mobile, since she trusts FB more than she trusts herself. But since Okabe doesn't even know who FB is, Mocha tells him where to find the IBN 5100 regardless, since she feels that FB has betrayed her. Since Okabe knows the location of the PC now, he wants to just go and grab it, but Kurisu tells him to wait as they can find out the identity of FB that way. Mocha joins Okabe in the stakeout. They observe the whole chain that the IBN 5100 goes through before being sent to the SERN headquarters in France. But before it is sent on a plane, it goes into the custody of Mr. Braun as well. So Mocha, Okabe, and Kurisu decide to confront Mr. Braun about his connections to SERN. He tells them that he is indeed FB and a rounder for SERN. Then he gives them his reasons for working for SERN. He tells them that he didn't want Na to be put in harm's way, so he did their bidding with no questions asked. Since both Mocha and himself failed their missions, Mr. Braun decides to kill her first and then himself, according to the SERN code of rounders. Okabe then resets the world line by sending a D-mail from Mr. Braun to Mocha's phone, changing the world line once again and finally acquiring the IBN 5100. Since the next step involves getting Daru to erase the data that SERN has on them, he suddenly realizes that this will erase the very first D-mail and shift him back to the timeline where Kurisu dies in the radio building. Since Okabe doesn't want to move to a timeline where Kurisu dies now, he decides not to go through with the hacking. But he doesn't tell Kurisu anything about it. He takes Mayuri to a comic market as he thinks of ways to save her without sacrificing Kurisu. And just as the clock strikes the time that Mayuri is supposed to die, Okabe tries to sacrifice himself instead. But Mayuri pushes him out of the way and once again dies in the process. And so he leaps back again, and this time, Kurisu forces the reason out of him. Later, as Mayuri is standing at her grandmother's grave, she tells Okabe that she is having dreams of consistently dying over and over again, and that Okabe is suffering because of it. On the other hand, Kurisu goes to the radio building, the place where she's supposed to die in the other world line. As Kurisu tells him that he should choose Mayuri over her, Okabe refuses to accept it and runs back to the lab hysterically. Then Okabe tries to time leap once again, but Kurisu tells him to stop this madness as she can't see him suffer like this, seeing Mayuri die over and over again. Once he makes the decision to abandon Kurisu and save Mayuri, he confesses his love for Kurisu. She then kisses him in response. The two of them share some final few moments of bliss before Okabe's eventual return to the Beta world line. The next day, Kurisu goes to the airport to leave for America while Daru and Okabe prepare to destroy the data in SERN's database. Just as they erase the data and Okabe is shifting out of there, Kurisu comes running to the lab and tells Okabe that she loves him. But before she could complete the sentence, Okabe leaves the world line. Coming back to the Beta world line once again, Okabe gets completely depressed and loses all hope. He He spends his days in solitude and gets rid of the phone microwave so he doesn't have second thoughts. But after a while, this reality's version of Suzuha calls him and tells him that she needs his help to prevent World War III. Okabe meets Suzuha and explains that she has come from the future to prevent Maki's Kurisu's death so that World War III can be prevented. She is here to influence the last such that they all enter a world line called the Steins Gate World Line, where Maki's Kurisu does not die and World War III does not happen. Thinking that he has a chance to save Kurisu now, Okabe agrees with her and goes back to the day that Kurisu was murdered in her time machine. He comes across Kurisu in the middle of it all, explaining why she said that she had already met him before back in episode 1. Okabe then hides in the room where Kurisu is supposed to die. Soon after, Kurisu arrives with her father, Dr. Nakabachi, and starts arguing with him. He wants to take credit for her accomplishments and even starts attacking her in his panicked state. Okabe jumps in to save her, but instead becomes the very person who kills her. Her father steals the theory, and that event will later lead to World War III, as it will put the superpowers of the world in an arms race. Okabe completely gives up on everything and tells Suzuha that it's over. She tries to offer him a second chance, but he tells her that the past will never change. He hasn't failed simply this one time. He has failed over and over and over again, so much so that hoping for success feels like naivety at this point. Mayuri then slaps him in the face and tells him to snap out of it. Suzuha then reveals that there actually is a chance now and tells him to view the video message he received on the day of Kurisu's murder. She tells him that she tricked him earlier and that he was supposed to fail once to view this message. The message contains a video of himself from the future. Future Okabe tells him that he must convince his past self that Kurisu is dead while actually saving her. He wants him to deceive himself and deceive the world at the same time, creating a paradox that will lead him to the Steins Gate World Line. After listening to the message, Okabe finally becomes convinced that he can do it and vows to save the love of his life. After picking up his gadgets from the lab to use them as a substitute for Kurisu's blood, Okabe is prepared to go back in time with Suzuha. This time, he takes out the metal lupa from the toy machine before Mayuri can take it out, as that later becomes the reason that the theory Dr. Nakabaki steals from Kurisu doesn't burn up in a fire. Taking out the metal one earlier prevents that from happening, as it was Mayuri's toy Upa that gets lost and ends up in the plane with him. Having a plastic one in the plane will prevent them from putting out the fire before the papers get burned. Now that that is taken care of, Okabe goes to execute his foolproof plan to save Kurisu. But the red liquid in his gadget has already dried up and can't be used as blood. So Okabe gets Nakabaki to stab him and uses his own blood to recreate the scene of Kurisu's death and fool his past self. The past Okabe comes and sees that bloody scene and sends Daru a D-mail, going on his long time travel journey through world lines. So both of the boxes are checked now, Kurisu is saved, and Nakabachi's stolen papers get burned. This will all prevent World War III now. Suzuha then carries an injured Okabe to his timeline and thanks her for everything he has done before he gets patched up. In the end, Okabe gets the badges made for all the lab members that Suzuha used as a clue to find Daru in the Alpha World line. The badge has all the initials for the members all the way up to 008, and he distributes them to all of them. He keeps one in the box for Suzuha as well for when she arrives. Later, as he's walking the streets of Akihabara, he comes across Kurisu, who's searching for him, as well, since he is the one who saved her life, and she remembers him from her vague memories from all the other world lines. The two of them meet, and Okabe hands her the badge that belongs to her. The two of them stare at each other, knowing that they share a much more special bond than two strangers, and also hoping for making some brand new memories down the line. And so the curtain closes on one of the greatest tales ever told. And that concludes our recap of the anime. If you haven't already, then make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on all the latest anime recaps and reviews. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a moment of anime greatness. Until the next video, stay tuned and keep exploring the extraordinary realm of anime with us.